Good morning. Good to be with everyone today. It is 10 a.m. Pacific here in Vancouver. If you're on the West Coast or in the Pacific Northwest specifically, we've got a fresh layer of snow last night, so can feel the times changing. Hope everyone had a great long weekend to our American friends and clients. It feels good to be going into the holiday season and hope all the brands have had a great Black Friday, Cyber Monday so far. I'm going to give everyone a few minutes to dial in here. I see a few people coming in. We're really excited to be having today's session. For those of you who aren't familiar, I'm Peter McMath. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at WPIC. And I'm really thrilled to be joined by our Vice President of Marketing and Head of Creative Labs, Charles Lavoie, is joining us from Eastern Canada. Charles, maybe before we get started, if you just want to share with everyone just a little bit about yourself, your background. Obviously, today's session is going to be on all things creative marketing in China, which is your domain and expertise. We've got some great questions, but love to hear a little bit about your background for those who aren't familiar.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Good to be here. Nice to meet you, everyone. And then, yeah, I'm Charles. As you set the stage, I'm on the East Coast of Canada right now. I did spend over 10 years living and working in Beijing, China, Hong Kong, and kind of a little bit all around China. Basically been in the brand and creative world for nearly 15 years. And then during my time in China, I basically focused on building and growing brands, launching campaigns for international brands and consumer product goods and food and beverage, as well as just financial service techs and so on. And then worked, I think 2015 to 2020 was really the rise of Chinese brands. So I worked a lot on the, some of the development, brand growth of some Chinese brands. So got to see, how Chinese are thinking about brand building and so on. So yeah, and then kind of now bringing this with the creative labs at WPIC.
Amazing. Well, your experience obviously adds a lot of value to many of our clients, and I hear that every day. And it leads me to have a lot of questions about all things creative in China. Obviously, the market has been changing a lot. I think, as everyone knows, it's a very dynamic market. So really appreciate your time for today's session to be able to do this and hopefully give people some context on what's happening, what you're seeing, where the trends are going. There's been some great questions submitted in advance that we'll hopefully get to all of them. I'd encourage everyone as you're dialing in, if you have questions for Charles on anything to do with marketing or creative in China, in the GoToMeeting portal, you'll see a questions portal that you can submit your question in. So feel free to do that. I've got that live on my desktop here, and hopefully we'll be able to get to all of your questions throughout today's session. So look, I want to set the stage. Obviously, we discuss this topic a lot. We write about it, we blog about it. There's many podcast episodes on it that you've also participated on. But for those that maybe aren't familiar or have missed, some of the previous, sessions we've done on this, can you just spend a few minutes talking briefly about really the importance of creativity in China, why that's becoming more and more important today, and just give everyone that context?
Yeah, that's a great question. And basically, it all comes down to the principle of consumer attention, right? So we're in an era where consumers are basically consuming more content than ever in the world. They're through social media, through just their day-to-day lives, have 10,000 kind of touch points in media information through a day, right? So as a brand, basically, and they've become kind of used to short format, quick attention grabbing, right? So the attention is very short. So as a brand, cutting through that noise and being able to, present your product, present your story through a unique, creative ways is really needed to cut through that noise and be able to grab that attention. After you grab that attention, then you can introduce your story and like your value proposition and so on. So I think it's true around the world, but in China, where it's even more competitive, where there's even more of a creator economy. Basically, everyone's a creator, everyone's an influencer. I think that becomes even more true.
Yeah, it's a great way to look at it. Obviously, here in North America, we've watched the trends back in the day from print to TV, from TV to search, from search to now social. Obviously, I think, a lot of brands and individuals know that China is really a mobile first market, that the internet has come to rise through mobile phones and mobile applications. Everyone's, I think, generally familiar with like the big internet, marketplaces in China, Tmall under the Alibaba ecosystem, JD under the Tencent ecosystem. Talk to us about, as you've seen the progression of digital channels and social channels, what is most relevant today, especially channels that allow brands to express creativity? What are some of those key channels that brands need to be aware of, that they need to be active on, and most importantly, ultimately be publishing content within?
Yeah, I think, top of mind, what's really hot right now, everywhere in the world, TikTok, and, that kind of got into attention in 2015 in China with Douyin. So that's obviously the one I would start with. That's where, most of the Gen Z and even millennials in China are spending more than 2 hours a day in average in entertainment, but also more and more in shopping, right? To support that, there's more traditional social media like the Weibo, which through some Western media has gone down in relevance. It's still a highly active social media, kind of the Twitter of China, I would say, Twitter/Instagram. So, for marketers, is a lower CPM kind of platform. So great for big campaigns, awareness, kind of KOL collaborations and resharing. There's also a lot of media around Little Red Book, which is a really incredible platform. I think that nowadays Pinterest is taking a lot of interest in replicating the Little Red Book model. So Little Red Book is really female oriented, started up a couple of years ago as really kind of beauty and cosmetic product review. It expanded across the portfolio to other niche, other kind of segments, but ultimately it remained a really good product review platforms where people through their consideration journey are gonna go to Little Red Book to see what other people, what KOC, KOLs are saying about you. In the video format, I mean, now every platform is moving to short video, but some of the big winners, like of the recents, are Bilibili, short, long format video, kind of the YouTube for younger demographics in China. So the reason they've been successful is really that level of interactivity when you have in the screens and that leverage of technology like AR and so on. So, it started as a gaming review platforms, but really expanded into, again, any product and experiences for younger generations. So I think these are the key ones. Obviously, I'm leaving WeChat for the end. WeChat is kind of the go-to all platform. Everyone on China is using it for multiple kind of use case, primary kind of messaging platforms, but it's really kind of the all-in-one app, as they call it. So it's a great, we often get asked for questions for brands from China, from the Western world, is it worth to have a website? I mean, WeChat is really, through the mini app and official account ecosystem, really becomes your website and the place probably that you can leverage the most for post-purchase acquisition, engagement, and so on, community management. So there's a lot like replacing your blog posts with WeChat marketing and so on would also happen within the WeChat ecosystem.
So is it a fair takeaway from that really within these core group of social channels, that the equivalence of like a brand website and blog within the WeChat ecosystem, short form video inside of Douyin, short form text inside of Weibo, really covers the basis for where a brand needs to be active and present, and that holistic approach is really required to replicate maybe what a traditional D2C brand has done here in the West?
Yeah, exactly. I think holistic approach, multi-touch point is great. Obviously, based on category, who your target audience is, price point, type of product, and so on. You'll do your media planning and invest more or pay more attention to one channel versus another. So that's kind of a custom case, and depending on where you are on your kind of China development.
That's great. Look, I see some questions coming in, and I'll just encourage everyone to keep submitting them. So I want to get into the real questions here from the audience today. But first question here is from David, and the question's on live streaming. And so everyone, I think, is familiar with like the big headlines around live streaming. But David's question is maybe more tactic specific. So what are some of the tactics that you've seen emerge over the past year that are new and trending in China within live streaming today?
Yeah, obviously a lot of noise and around live streaming nowadays, and I think that's very valuable and tool. And ultimately, the way I see live stream is an alternative social media, right? So why is live stream so relevant? I'd like to start with that, and I think it's really bringing kind of three elements: the power of interactivity. So we often forget about live stream, and if you live through live stream in China, it's extremely interactive. It's not just the person filming and presenting, but there's a number of questions, and usually great live streamer will incorporate kind of elements like lucky draw, will take questions from the public live, will kind of improvise a little bit, so they'll be scripted, but there'll be a level of improvisation to bring that level of engagement, right? Second, it's real time, and really third is authentic, right? So I think going back to history of everything information marketing in China, it's really hard to get authenticity. So even if you think about short video and Douyin and everything else that is not live streaming, you can pretty much edit any video and make like your product in any context and so on. Live stream does give that really kind of unique authenticity factor to the experience and to what you're delivering. So I think that's why it's especially strong in China, but also we're starting to see even more of that trend in the West, right? So everything around like the power of now, right? It's happening now, it's real, I can almost touch it and feel it. It's as close as you get to kind of a real life experience. Like if we go into tactical, I think we've seen and we've heard a lot about live streaming, the big live streamers making like incredible amount of sales, right? And that was very like 2020, 2021 with Leeds Yahtzee and Via and a number of others. And ultimately, like, why was that? It's obviously, they were entertaining, but they were bringing the best discounts to their public, right? So people are going to live stream. It's like, I don't have to go through the exercise of shopping. I know if I go to live stream, I know a product, I want it. There'll be a good recommendation. They'll be the best price. Now, more and more as, maybe brands can sustain that heavy discount or don't want to necessarily introduce their brand through a discounting factor. I think that what we've seen is live stream as a media becoming much more kind of a brand and marketing exercise, and instead of shooting live stream in like studio sets or controlled environments, brands taking consumers to live experience live streams. So whether it's global brands kind of representing, their global headquarters or even nature environment, or I've seen a campaign also from Semir, kind of a China fashion brand that went one of the highest point in Western China and kind of conducted a fashion show on live stream, and that created like a super high amount of interaction, right? That newness factor. And again, as people can't travel much right now in China and a lot of restrictions and so on, I think they really leveraging live stream for experiences and sharing experiences as well as products has become kind of very important. Yeah, and maybe one last point would be, I think one interesting thing that we've seen is these avatar kind of virtual live streamers, virtual KOLs that have started to rise. I think probably many of you have seen that in the media and so on. I think that appeals to, like gaming being such an important element in China, but also just that newness factor and that kind of fact that you have a lot more control on what that person can say and kind of be able to express creativity in another way. So I think that's something that we'll continue to see. There's a lot of talk in the West right now about the metaverse and so on. Like some are bullish, some are more bearish. If there's a place in the world where I see a form of metaverse kind of being really kind of gaining traction, it's really in China. So I think that connecting kind of the real world and the virtual world is really happening already now in China.
That's fascinating. And yeah, some great insights there. Want to move on to another question here from Alyssa. And she asks, one of the things that we see a lot in China are brand collaborations. And she's referencing like a Louis Vuitton and Supreme, the skateboard brand, where they'll like work together on a capsule collection. Can you talk why that's so popular? It obviously gets huge amounts of attention. They sell out instantly. But what are really the benefits, for consumers within these types of brand collaborations that are happening?
Yeah, and this is so true. And I think I have this conversation maybe once a week with Western, brand managers and marketing people who, sometimes suggest some of these brands collaborations. They're a little bit out of the box, but then we really need to kind of educate them about what other brands are doing and why it's relevant to the Chinese market, Chinese consumers, right? And I think we've seen it with the bigger brands that have had success, right? So you mentioned Louis Vuitton that did it, I think, with League of Legends in China, but so it's really probably a step ahead still in China and like more active, more present. But there's been a lot of new brand collaborations. I think that Burberry did one globally with Minecraft recently. So I think we see a lot of these kind of new brand collaboration from luxury with a kind of very Gen Z oriented kind of gaming as they're trying to attract new consumers and audiences. But in terms of value of why that's valuable, especially in China, I think maybe apart from the obvious of resource sharing and audience sharing, right? Is I think I was talking actually to one of our colleagues from our team in the Chinese market, and they came up with a interesting expression, which is very true, is consumers in China like very much everything that's new, but they're also afraid of change, right? So there's that contradiction here where they're afraid of change and maybe like trying like kind of adoption and stuff like that. So that concept of, once you get a consumer, how do you keep loyalty is by kind of constantly bringing these new products or these new exclusive editions or new packagings or new gifts and whatever. Ultimately selling kind of your products in new stories is a good way to kind of make repeat purchase. Second, I think it comes back to that concept of individualism and wanting to be unique. I think that's something that is really, really true to Chinese millennials and Chinese Gen Z, just because of cultural factors in which they grew up and so on. They want to feel like they have a unique access to a unique product, that they're part of a club, that they're part of that exclusivity. So brand collaborations usually give that, where it's kind of limited edition brand collaborations. And then third, I think it goes back to maybe curiosity. I think curiosity and element of surprise. I think that's just something that they're looking constantly to be surprised. They're open to that. They're very they're not critical of maybe more out of the box brand collaborations that bring brands from different industries and so on together. So I think these would be like the three core concepts in which brand collaboration can help a brand flourish in China.
There's a lot of great insight there. One of the things that you touched on, and one of the words you mentioned early on, was the concept of loyalty. And there's a question from Michael here specifically to loyalty programs that I think is a really good segue. And so this is something that Alibaba has talked a lot about inside of the Tmall ecosystem. And so Michael's question is, what are the loyalty programs that you've seen work really well? And who are the brands that are doing that you're seeing ultimately, implement these loyalty programs really effectively?
Yeah, that's a good question. Again, I think it's really the topic of the hour from Alibaba, and as cost of customer acquisition and everything is like, to get new customers is harder. I think like a focus on keeping your existing customer engaged is really important. I think loyalty really comes back to like having programs that are focused on one, I would say, like great care for customer, understanding of what your customer care about, and providing that extra support that you can, the loyalty, as well as I think this concept of gamification through shopping around the world, especially shopping in China, is really, really important. So, there's loyalty programs through the platforms. Obviously, that makes sense to do a loyalty program with Tmall, uh, you know, as the biggest transaction platform, and they've launched their own kind of loyalty program, which brands can take part of it. I think one of the most successful programs has been 88 VIP. And then basically the way this works is that consumer get a score, right? And that score varies over time based on their habit on the platform, based on what they purchase, based on reviews and so on. There's always that concept of scoring. You can improve your score, you can compare your score, and so on. And then based on the score that you get, then you can get access to, through a number of brand partnerships that they have, discounts at your favorite car wash, maybe a discount on your music streaming platform, and so on, right? So I think that's something that brands at the brand level, at the store level, can also leverage to create loyalty programs for their own brand, right? So I think one of the great case that I've seen, and that is in the pet industry, Royal Canin, which is kind of French pet industry that is doing really well in China. It's one of the fastest growing industry right now. They made a partnership and really kind of address kind of a combination of loyalty and CSR program, customer responsibility, but basically providing discounts, and even to some extent to their best customers, free medical examinations for their pets and so on, for like the people that are purchasing a certain amount, so that have a high score in their stores. So it's really that extra care that shows like, oh, the brand is not only here for my wallet, but they care about me, and then they provide that right through that partnerships. I mean, we ourselves, launched this as well with, Is Clinical, and kind of skincare brand, where we have partners with dermatologist salons across China and these type of things, where we can offer preferable discounts for the people that shop through our stores and so on. So these are kind of tactics that we use, and we've seen pretty successful.
Thank you. Yeah, that's fascinating. I know we're coming up on time, but we still have time for a few more questions here. If anyone watching has anything else, we've got some great questions here, but we probably sneak a few more in. There's a question here from Carol on influencer marketing, and this has obviously been a huge topic for the last 3 to 5 years in China around KOLs and KOCs being key opinion leaders and key opinion consumers. But talk to us, as you look out to the horizon. Obviously, we're coming out of a really interesting year, a really dynamic year. As you look ahead to 2023, and Carol's question here is on the importance of KOLs and the relevance of their influence in a consumer's mind, if you will. Are they still at the forefront in terms of importance? Are you seeing that come down? Are you seeing it continue to trend upwards? Really the core of the question is, are they still massively important to a brand's success and a brand's ability to be creative in China?
Yeah, so I think, again, maybe there's a wish from some brand marketing person that it would become less important, that it would go back to more traditional media, but the reality is they're more important than ever. I was reading some data recently that KOL economy in China represents 12% of the entire advertising industry. And if we look at, we were talking about social channel, right, like Douyin, so above 65, I think around 70% of the entire advertising span on Douyin. So there's different advertising tools, feed ads, and so on, is spent on KOLs. So that just gives you on the importance of how it is still in the entire economy, in the entire playbook. And I think just because of the format, and we were talking at the beginning about the democratization about content creation, like everyone becoming creators, and people, because of the technology that is being available, like a lot of people can be creators right now. That said, it doesn't mean that brands should be lazy and kind of just say, oh, I give my products to a KOL and then that's my marketing playbook, right? First, there's it's like casting, right? You can do a movie and say actors are important, right? Obviously actors, but having the right casting, having the right KOL, having the right fit, having the right flow of KOLs, what timing they come. And then really what people underestimate is like how to negotiate, how to brief them, how to talk with them. Numbers like making sure you have a category exclusivity, making sure you extend the number of posts, talking about long-term partnerships, making sure that there is proper tagging as well as like content rights, so you can really ultimately, as a goal for a brand, rely less on KOL and maybe like become a KOL yourself, right? So while you kind of borrow audience from KOL, you should always have efforts on your own social media to build your own brand as a KOL, right? I think that's the main learning and philosophy that we're trying to work on the accounts that we have.
I love that analogy of a KOL selection to casting an actor. I think that's a great parallel and way to frame it. You mentioned, obviously Douyin and live streaming. One topic that gets brought up in our office and with our sales teams a lot is social commerce as really this thriving new point of sale that's really taken up a lot of attention. I think it's well known that, Tmall and JD have really owned the share of consumer spending historically over the last, 5 to 10 years. There's all these new social commerce platforms here. And so can you talk a little bit about the state of what we would describe as social commerce today in China? And maybe, I think Douyin is a great example as a leader in that space, and like the role of Douyin within the broader world of commerce today. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a topic that is relevant to the entire world, but I think, as going back to the basic of consumer attention, like people are spending more time on Low Redbook, more time on Douyin, more time on Kuaishou, which is an equivalent of Douyin in China, right? So with like over, I think, 700 million monthly average users, and the amount of time spent on that. First, if we go back to the basics of marketing, right? Awareness, consideration, conversions, right? So where will you get people aware to consider your products happens more and more on social, less and less on traditional kind of e-commerce platform. I think the format of it, of how people, used to maybe read more reviews, go on blogs and so on. Now they follow the influencers, and there's like product recommendations on Douyin and so on. So the top funnel kind of really starts through social. Now, what Douyin in China has figured out as well is the conversion funnel, the last part, right? So as a marketer, whether that I've read some articles about social commerce is not really making it in the West and in the US. And I find this funny because ultimately what I qualify as social commerce, if the awareness and consideration journey starts on social, whether the commerce transaction happens on Amazon or on your D2C website or on Tmall in China, it's still social commerce to the base of it, right? So it really depends on semantic and
that attribution goes back to a social channel.
Yeah, the attribution, right? So that's what's really important. Now, in terms of Douyin, I mean, ultimately, like transactions, having that conversion point is also important. It's also a big part of the funnel, where if you don't get the conversion, then the rest doesn't mean anything. So Douyin has really figured out how to do it in 2021 in China and now open for global e-commerce, right? So over 400% growth of GMV last year. I think a major part of the e-commerce kind of growth came from Douyin last year. I think it's still very geared at spontaneous kind of sales. So spontaneous sales, ticket item of $50, $100, and so on that are like happening on direct conversions. But as they're figuring out also the e-commerce tool, I think that just becomes a way where you're able to do these bundles on the e-commerce of Douyin to be able to convert that first phase of the funnel to make sure that when they're actually in your shopping environment, your car environment, that like they don't not only necessarily buy the product that they saw in the video, but that they buy 3 or 4 products from your brands, or that they come back and repeat, as purchasing journey after on the Douyin ecosystem.
That's great. I want to squeeze a few more questions in here while we have you. Question from Francis, and super direct question. So Francis asks, give us some brands that we can look up on our own time, can be both in the WPIC portfolio or not, that creatively do really well in China. Do you have some brands that you can share with the audience to check out?
Yeah, of course. I think this is, the best way to do is to learn from the one that do it the best, and kind of get some inspiration, and kind of that's where creativity always starts, from a source of inspirations and so on, right? So I mean, couple of brands, different industry and so on. First, I think I love what Lego is doing. I think as a global brand, kind of that concept of using their global campaign, global brand image, but really localizing in terms of creative campaigns. So they've launched really cool offline and online activations. They mastered really Douyin creators, launching a lot of these user-generated kind of contests and campaigns of like building building your dreams, building the future, and so on. So that's something that got really high amount of engagement. I think to connect to brand collaborations, Crocs has done it globally well, but they've done a lot of local collaborations as well to kind of appeal to local culture trends and so on. So I think that's something that Crocs has done really well as a global brand. Maybe a local brand, one brand that I've followed for 5-6 years that I loved from the start was Lavoie, kind of this female lingerie pajama brand that really had a focused brand and really kind of started on simple consumer insights of brands in that sector were not really addressing addressing a need or addressing aspiration that a lot of the Chinese females in China had. So I think that's the really principle. Car industry, one car company, I think there's a lot of talk about electric cars. I love what NIO is doing, especially in terms of not just in terms of branding and marketing, but customer experience. They're really close to their customer. They've launched a lot of really creative programs around battery swapping and just everything around their cars, right? So the car is a product, but really when people are purchasing NIO, they're purchasing the community and the experience around it. So I think these are some cool kind of example of the big brands. Within our portfolio, I think we just launched a couple. We've been working with a number of brands for years and so on. Some of the fun kind of new launch that we've done, Fjorda and like Omega-3 brands. We launched a campaign around kind of less is more, talking about, and then with like really creative kind of campaigns talking about maybe young Chinese consumer wanting to go away from all that kind of shining, like looking rich, being rich, and so on, going back a little bit more to basics. So that was aligned with their brand value proposition. Hydro Flask doing super well globally. We've done really good kind of community engagement, outdoor collaborations, super creative stuff in China. The Rodsack winter jacket brand is having a really good kind of second year in China right now. We've launched creative kind of celebrity collaborations, working on kind of offline pop-ups and so on. There's been a lot of great work from our team in China.
That's great. It sounds like you've got your hands full with a number of these campaigns on the go. I want to get one more question in here before we wrap up, and not changing topics, but just, this is a question from Freddie on offline events, and how important are offline events in China in building creative resonance, and is that important today?
Yeah, obviously there's been challenge around offline events with all the unpredictable kind of COVID lockdown that have happened. But I think, usually it's happening, but there's a lot of cities that aren't in lockdown. We've still done quite a lot of offline events and a lot of successful ones. And ultimately, I think it comes down to what your product is and what your category is. I think it's relevant for everyone, but you need to make choices of brand, right? Ultimately, there are brands and products and just categories that are more require more multi-sensorial experience, right? So I need to touch it, do I need to taste it, do I need to feel it, and so on. That's one big element that will tell us, like, to support the e-commerce, to support the D2C model, there might be a stronger need to do offline events. Second, I think the power of offline event is true universally is like to diminish that, increase that trust factor, right? I think it's like doing a business meeting in person, right? Once you meet a person in person, you gain kind of a trust level. Same thing for consumers with brands. When they see a brand offline, they know it's real. They have a different sentiment, a closer kind of engagement to that. So I think there is ways, and we've found very creative ways through like partnerships with gyms for health supplements and so on. Pop-ups and co-branding to do it at very kind of cost-effective ways, to find ways to get people to try, experience the products and so on. So there is relevance for sure.
That's amazing. Charles, always so insightful. I love chatting with you and hearing about what's happening on the ground. And I'm always so impressed by the work that you and your team are able to do. I want to thank you for the time today, and I want to thank everyone for joining. If you've got more questions that we didn't get to during today's session, you can reach out to us, and you can find us on the web at wpic.co, or send us an email, info@wpic.co. We'd be more than happy to get some one-on-one time with the team and yourself and your company to discuss anything more specific to your particular brand. But with that, Charles, I'll give you back a couple minutes in your day, and looking forward to doing this again, hopefully soon.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Thanks everyone for the great question. I was really impressed by the quality of the questions, and then don't hesitate to reach out. And we're updating our website and LinkedIn feed with kind of new insights and case studies. So feel free to also kind of scroll around that to learn more.
Great. Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.